Hello, this is Mr. Ippolito, and welcome to the USCIS Civics exam. We're going to go over the first half of the Civics exam questions in this YouTube video, and then we'll go over the other half of the exam questions in the next video. So let's go ahead and just jump in and get started. All right, question number one, what is the supreme law of the land? Of course, that is the Constitution. There's nothing higher than the Constitution. There's no United States law, no state law, no president, no member of Congress is above the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Number two, what does the Constitution do? Well, it either sets up or defines the government. It also protects the basic rights of all Americans. I like to think if our country is a body, like a human body, the Constitution is like the skeleton, right? Because it provides the framework, the structure for our government and for the way our country is set up. Number three, the idea of self-government is in the first three words of the Constitution. Those three words, of course, are "we the people." Those are the first three words of the preamble, the first paragraph of the Constitution. And really important, too, because we the people, it means that we are creating, this is not, yes, we are states, and yes, there are laws, but this Constitution and all of these laws, it all comes down to the power rests with the people. And so that's why I think these three words are so important as the start of our Constitution. All right, number four, what is an amendment? It is either a way that you can change or add to the Constitution, right? So if you need to make a change, and we've had to make some changes over time as our country has grown and evolved and changed, or if we simply need to make an addition to something that the framers didn't think of, or could not even conceive of back in the day, then that's why we have an amendment process, so we can add to it as our nation's needs grow and change over time. All right, number five, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, those are, of course, called the Bill of Rights, and those are the majority of our rights as we define them, our civil liberties as we define them in our country, those are contained in the Bill of Rights. Number six, one right or freedom from the First Amendment. Well, First Amendment is one of the most important amendments of the Constitution. So it would be the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and then the right of assembly and the right to petition. Right. So those are some of our most important rights, which is why it's at number one, the very First Amendment. And again, we're going to go over in class. We'll go over all of those in detail. But for the exam, you only need to know one of these five freedoms of the First Amendment. Number seven, how many amendments does the Constitution have total? In total, 27 amendments. The most recent amendment was ratified in 1992. That was the 27th Amendment. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, they were ratified back in 1791. And so really not too bad. The framers did a pretty good job. If since 1791, the Constitution has only been changed 17 times, that means they did a pretty good job the first time they created the Constitution. All right, number eight, what did the Declaration of Independence do? Not a trick question. It declared our independence or announced our independence from Great Britain, said that we were free. Again, not a trick question. If the Declaration of Independence is a complex document, so if you wanted to say how it discusses our natural rights, or it discusses our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you could go there as well. But these are pretty much the standard answers about what it actually did. Speaking of those rights, two rights in the Declaration, well, you could show off and just say all three: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We spent a lot of time in class on those, and those are directly the words of Thomas Jefferson, which he borrowed some of the words from John Locke, if you remember. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you can just pick any two of those three. Number 10, what is freedom of religion? So it's basically your ability or your freedom, your right to practice any religion you want in our country, or to not practice any religion at all. It doesn't say it here on the slide, but freedom of religion also means that you are free from government coercion or government influence in what you believe in. So, for example, I could not lead a prayer before we take our civics exam. That would be inappropriate for me to lead a Christian prayer or a Jewish prayer or a Muslim or a Buddhist prayer. That is not my job as a public school teacher, to be a religious leader. It is my job to teach you about American history and government. So not only is it your freedom to practice any religion you wish or not, but also your freedom from, it's what's called the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. In other words, government will not establish or support or favor any one religion over another. All right, number 11, what is the economic system in the United States? That is capitalism. We can call it a capitalist economy or a free market economy. But if you just write capitalism, then that will be fine with me. Number 12, rule of law. Of course, you remember this from Magna Carta. And remember this from our example we talked about with President Richard Nixon. No one is above the law, right? Not even a president. Everyone must follow the law. No one is higher than the law, and they can't just claim that they're better than everyone else. All right, number 13, one branch or part of the government. You just need to name one of these three. The legislative branch, the executive branch, or the judicial branch. We've been spending a lot of time on branches of government, so you should be able to get just one of those three. Number 14, what stops one branch of government from becoming too powerful? They're two separate concepts, checks and balances and separation of powers. We have learned more about checks and balances so far, but either one of these is acceptable. Basically, both of these separate the powers that each branch has, and then also makes it so that each branch has a check or a way to limit the power of the other two branches. Number 15, who is in charge of the executive branch? Of course, that is the President of the United States. Number 16, who makes federal laws? That would be Congress, right? Congress, it is the legislative branch that makes the laws in our country, as it does in most countries and also most states. All 50 states have a legislative branch as well. Our legislative branch consists of the California Assembly and the California Senate. So every state, most countries have some sort of legislative body. Ours is Congress. They make the laws. Number 17, the two parts of the United States Congress, that would be the Senate and the House, right? The House of Representatives and the Senate are the two parts of our Congress. Number 18, how many U.S. senators are there? Well, if we do the math, there are 50 states, and each state gets 2 senators per state. So that's a total of 100 senators. All right, next, we elect a U.S. senator for how many years? That's going to be 6 years, right? They get the longest term out of any out of either a member of the House of Representatives or the president. So between the executive branch and the legislative branch, they get the longest terms. It's actually federal judges get their jobs for life. We haven't really talked about that yet. So I was about to say they get the longest jobs. Senators get the longest jobs. They actually don't. Federal judges, Supreme Court justices, they get their job for life on good behavior. We'll talk more about that when we get to the judicial branch. But senators get 6 years. All right, who is one of your state's United States senators now? You can either pick from Dianne Feinstein or Kamala Harris. They are both senators representing California. Dianne Feinstein, I believe, she took office back in the early 90s. I want to say 92 or 94. And then Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, she just recently took office. And of course, Kamala Harris right now is currently a candidate for president in the Democratic Party. Well, so we'll see how that goes for her. All right, so those are our 2 senators from California. Number 21, the House of Representatives says how many voting members? A total of 435. That has been set for a while. It's been growing ever since our nation began. But for a long time now, it is fixed at 435. All right, number 22, we elect a U.S. representative. These are members of the House. For how many years? Of course, that answer is 2. And we talked about the reason why it's only 2 years is because this is the people's house. And we want these people, these members of the House of Representatives, to be really accountable to the people. And so that's why we make their term a very, very short term, only 2 years. And then we can decide if we want to keep them in, we vote them back in, or if not, we vote them out. All right, number 23, name your U.S. representative. Well, ours used to be Katie Hill up until very recently, but currently the California 25th Congressional District, we have none. So on your exam, you can put none or NA, or we don't have one right now. But currently we have none. We will have that position filled by the spring of 2020. All right, number 24, who does a U.S. Senator represent? It represents all the people of that particular state. Number 25, why do some states have more representatives than others? You know this, of course, it is based on population, right? So the more people that a state has, the more representatives in the House that they're going to get. So California has the most. We currently have 53 members of the House. A state like Wyoming or North Dakota, they have a very low population, so they only get 1 member of the House of Representatives. So it's all based on the population of the state. Number 26, we elect a president for how many years? Of course, that's 4 years, so every 4 years. Just like every Summer Olympics. Every time there's a Summer Olympics, there's also a United States presidential election every 4 years. In what month do we vote for president? It's always in November. November is always election month, the biggest election month. We have elections in other months, but this is the biggest election month of all for us, is the month of November. Number 28, currently the name of our president now is Donald Trump. So you can say Donald Trump or Donald J. Trump, or you can just say Trump. Last names are just fine for this exam. And then the name of the vice president right now, that's currently Vice President Mike Pence. You could call him Michael Pence, or you could just call him Pence. As long as you use last names, that would be an acceptable, correct answer for this exam. Number 30, if the president can no longer serve, who becomes president? Of course, that is the vice president. Oh, we got a little bit of a spacing issue there. But yes, if anything happens to the president, if the president resigns or is impeached and removed or dies in office, then the vice president becomes president of the United States. If both the vice president and the vice president can no longer serve, and if that happens simultaneously, then it is the Speaker of the House who becomes president of the United States. Has that ever happened in the history of the United States? No. No, and currently the way our government is set up, if a president does resign or die or gets removed somehow from office, and the vice president takes over, their very first job, as soon as that vice president becomes president, is to appoint a new vice president that would then be approved by both houses of Congress. I looked this up in the Constitution. They would be approved by both houses, and so, but again, that's the likelihood of the Speaker of the House becoming president it's something that's never happened before, and it's not very likely. But we do have that possibility just in case it does happen. Number 32, who's the commander-in-chief of the military? That's the president. 33, who signs bills to become laws? That's also the president. And then number 34, who vetoes bills? Again, that is the president, right? So the president, the correct answer for 32, 33, and 34. Number 35, what does the president's cabinet do? The president's cabinet advises the president, right? So they, to the extent that the president wishes to listen to their advice, that's up to the president. The president can listen to what his or her cabinet has to say, or they can completely ignore that advice and do their own thing, but they are the chief executive, the president. They have that right to do that. Number 36, 2 cabinet level positions. So these are all of the cabinet positions here. You need to name 2 of them if you see this question on your exam. Again, almost all of them start with secretary of. And of course, secretary in this context does not mean like someone who answers phones or is an assistant. This secretary here in this context means they are the head of that department, right? So in other countries, like Britain, for example, they would call this position a minister position, like the Minister of Education or the Minister of Defense. But we just call this position secretary. Number 37, the judicial branch, they interpret the laws, right? They review them, they explain the laws. If there's any question as to the interpretation of a law, the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, they will do that. They resolve disputes. So, for example, in the example of Richard Nixon, when he refused to hand over those tapes, during the Watergate scandal, and he did not want to hand over the recordings that were made in the White House, in the Oval Office of the White House, and Congress said, "That's evidence, Mr. President. You need to hand that over." And he's like, "Nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm the president, and I don't have to." So Congress actually had to sue President Nixon. They took him to court, United States versus Nixon, and in that court case, the Supreme Court decided they had to resolve that dispute, right? They had to decide who is right and whose actions are constitutional and whose actions are not. And in this case, they decided in favor of Congress. And they said that the president's actions were unconstitutional and forced the president to hand over those tapes. All right, number 38, the highest court in the United States. That is, of course, the Supreme Court. And then 38, how many justices are on the Supreme Court? Currently 9. These are the current justices. I got a picture for you. So the current justices of the Supreme Court. All right, well, we'll start at the top row. That's Justice Neil Gorsuch, and then Sonia Sotomayor. The next is Elena Kagan, and then Brett Kavanaugh. That's the top row. Bottom row, Stephen Breyer, Clarence Thomas, John Roberts. He's the Chief Justice. He's the one sitting in the center. And then Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then Samuel Alito is the final one seated on the right of your photo. So those are all 9 of our current Supreme Court justices. All right, number 40, who is the Chief Justice of the United States right now? I just said his name. That's Chief Justice John Roberts. There he is right there. Originally appointed by President George W. Bush, I believe in 2005. Number 41, under our Constitution, some powers belong to the federal government. What's one power of the federal government? Well, there are several. Oh my goodness, I need to reformat this as well. Print money, declare war, create an army, make treaties. So actually, the powers, we were just talking about this when we went over the federal system, right? Federalism. So weights and measures would be another example. That would be a correct answer. Regulate the atomic clock, you could say that. Maintain the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, you could say that as well. Anything that is a power of the federal government, the national government, the government of the United States would be a valid answer. All right, 42, under our Constitution, some powers belong to the states. Again, remember we're talking about federalism here, the federal system. And so these are just some of those powers. Schooling and education, police protection, fire and safety. You could also say marriage and family laws as well. Those are all powers given to the states under the Constitution. All right, 43, who is your governor? Who's the governor of your state right now here in California? Currently, our governor is Governor Gavin Newsom. He's been serving as governor since January of 2019. All right, next, the capital of our state is Sacramento. That's a picture of the Capitol building there in Sacramento. Modeled, you can, if you've seen a picture or you've been to the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., you can see it has kind of a similar look to it with the Capitol dome and sort of the Roman-style columns. So that's done intentionally. It was modeled kind of based on the similar architecture to our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. All right, 45. What are the two major political parties in the United States? Those are the Democrats and Republicans, and they've been the two major parties since 1854. So they've been around quite a long time, and we have other parties. They're called third parties, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the Peace and Freedom Party. There are those other third parties, but these are the two major political parties in the United States. 46, the political party of the president right now. Currently, President Trump is a Republican. He's a member of the Republican Party. 47, the name of the Speaker of the House of Representatives right now. Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. She is from California. She represents a district up in the San Francisco area. 48, there are 4 amendments to the Constitution about who can vote. Describe one of them. So we talked about this in class. These are the 4 ways that voting rights have been expanded by the Constitution since our Constitution began. So when you're thinking of this, you think, what is one way that voting rights have been expanded? What's one voting right that people have now that they did not have when the Constitution was written? So here are the 4. Age, so that voting age has been dropped from 21 down to 18. Poll tax, you no longer need to pay a poll tax to vote. That was only in some states, and primarily used in the South during the time of segregation to prevent African Americans from voting. Gender, the gender qualification has been removed. You used to only be able to vote if you were a man. Now all men and women can vote. And then finally the race qualifications, right? It used to just be that only white people could vote, only white men could vote. And then under the 15th Amendment, race was no longer a qualification to vote. So these are the 4 ways now. Some students have mentioned, well, what about property ownership? And it is true, while that used to be something you had to own property in order to vote before, the states went ahead and just made that rule on their own when they removed the property qualification. So if the states do it on their own, then you don't need an amendment to the Constitution, because if you recall, it's states that ultimately decide the rules for who is eligible for voting and how voting is going to take place. It's just you need a constitutional amendment if the people of the United States feel that some states are being unfair. And this is under these circumstances. For example, some states were already allowing women to vote. Wyoming was the first state to allow women to vote, and they allowed women to vote starting in the 1880s or 1890s. And so it was finally, some states were starting to allow it, but other states weren't. And so it was in 1920 when we amended the United States Constitution so that all Americans could vote regardless of their gender. So anyway, those are the 4 ways that the Constitution has been changed to increase voting rights. Number 49, one responsibility that is only for United States citizens. So serve on a jury or vote in a federal election. This is very similar to question 50 because this talks about responsibilities. And then the next one is rights. Name one right for that only United States citizens can have. and that would be either voting in a federal election or running for federal office. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, that is question number 50. I'm going to stop right there and upload this to YouTube, and then in just a few minutes you'll be able to check out questions 51 through 100. Thanks for sticking with me, and good luck with your study. Bye-bye.